originated in Africa reportedly, transferred to America, so now it becomes an African American disease. So the population, again, how does that have to do with population control? Well, again, the Census Bureau's job is to keep things nice and tidy for the federal government so they know exactly how, where, and to whom to distribute the budget. So if you hear about AIDS coming from Africa and homosexuals had the disease when it was first reported, then that would deter you from becoming a homosexual, the plan was, and also deter you from having sex with an African American. Because again, AIDS is an African disease in America, which makes it an African American disease. So the two automatically correlate. So for the Census Bureau, which is still an issue for them today and always have been, mixing the population. Now, back when, of course, we all know, like I said, recognize slavery, but don't weigh too heavily on it. During that time, count the years back, 400 and plus, count the years back, the slave owners were having sex with the slave women, and probably vice versa. The slave owners' wives was having sex with the slave men. Population mixing, even then. Now, they had a little more blatant way of dealing with it back then. Oftentimes, they would just kill the person. But you really can't do that now because that's not the correct way to handle business in the United Snakes of America. So as time went on, population mixing became a big problem because the Census Bureau was finding too much gray area in between the, no pun intended, black and white definition that they had already set out. Now, for AIDS, again, keeps you from being a homosexual because it was found initially in homosexuals. Keeps you from having sex with African Americans because they, in the mind, of course, started this African disease that is now in America because blacks came from Africa, even though many blacks, over 90%, have never even been to Africa. So that helps the Census Bureau from being too gray, from having to count mixed populations and mixed households when they do their studies, their annual census report. Now, if you take notice, probably every year or two, when you go to apply for a job or you take your child to school and you apply for a job and you fill out the school forms, the list under ethnicity gets longer and longer. You have white, Caucasian, black, African American, Hispanic, non-African American, or you have Asian, Hispanic, Asian, non-black, black, non-Caucasian. You have every type of order or mix that you can think of because the populations are mixing entirely too much and it's out of control. So now the government doesn't necessarily know how to distribute the budget the way that they intended to distribute the budget. Because you have the places like Vermont, you have the places like Montana, places like California. You know, the government distributes these states, these areas, a different budget than they distribute to Louisiana, to Alabama. Okay? And don't let it fool you because that's exactly how it goes. So if you are having sex with a black person or, you know, you're still being a homosexual, then that means you have a possibility of mixing up the households. So the plan was to separate the households. So then they said, let's take this even a step further. Let's start teaching sex education in the schools and not only have sex education in the schools, but make one of the main emphasis, one of the main focal points, of the class, AIDS and protective sex. Now, how does that affect population control? Well, if you look at it, Look at the alarming rate that young teenagers, even 12, 13, 14 years old, are having sex and having babies. Now, these children are not even old enough to work. They're not even at the 15, 16-year-old limit to work. So who's taking care of these children? The government. So if we teach sex education in school, we make the two most highly emphasized points of the class protective sex and AIDS, because protective sex prevents possibly AIDS and prevents possibly pregnancy. But better yet still, the best form of protection is abstinence, not having sex, period. Then we don't have to pay for these children that these children are having. So we scare them from having sex. First off, I don't understand why you have a sex education class other than these 2 points I just made. Because you're born and you grow up knowing how to have sex. Animals grow up knowing how to have sex without a sex education. Okay? That's what you're born to do. You're born to multiply. You're born to pass your genes. You don't need to be taught this. You are in school in sex education being taught not to do this. How not to do this. Because you're messing up the Census Bureau. You're messing up the government spending, the budget. It's not about you. It's not about children not being able to succeed, because if a young child, more than likely, if a young child, 13, 14, 15 years old, has a child, a lot of them unfortunately drop out of school. So if they drop out of school, a lot of times they end up realistically working dead-end jobs. And they end up realistically living on Section 8. And I'm not down talking these things at all. But basically my point is they start using government money. OK, and that takes away from government spending in other areas where the government wants to spend it. So it's better that you don't have a child early than to have a child, period, and having the government take care of you. See, those are forms of population control. So then, what happened then? Still have the homosexual issue in America. Still have the mixing of the races in America. So AIDS wasn't really working the way that they thought it would work. So then in the mid-90s, we see one of the child heroes, Magic Johnson, great basketball player for the Los Angeles Lakers, come out and say that he has AIDS. Yes, it can happen to me too. So children are saying, wow, even Magic Johnson has AIDS. So anybody can get it, because this is a hero. This is Superman to a lot of these young children that really don't have a lot to look up to. So the person that they look up to doing what they love to do, which is play basketball, and has always been a positive role model to them, for them, has AIDS. So that even scares them further and discourages them further to not have sex. And then when they grow up, especially if they aren't black, they grow up learning to maybe not have sex with blacks, because they learn where AIDS is supposed to have come from and how it was found out, and learn how not to be